Right now, it's an extremely exciting time to be a Xenoblade fan. Although there's no confirmation of a new game, certain events in Xenoblade 3's story DLC implied that the next game in the series could be something other than just Xenoblade 4. So naturally, the entire community has been up in flames over the last year and a bit, speculating as to what comes next for the series. They could bring back Xenosaga with a remake, make some kind of spin-off, or maybe even try a new Xeno game with a completely new title. No matter what, the future of the series is definitely going to be really interesting. But right now, there's one game that I've consistently seen people talk about the most on social media, and that's Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. With the Wii U server shutting down and the new Nintendo console being right around the corner, it feels like the perfect time to give the game another shot. Not only would it be a great way to show what the new console is capable of, but it could also tease what the Xenoblade series will look like going into this next generation. So today, I want to talk about everything we can expect if they decide to make the definitive version of Xenoblade X, and explain why it might be more important than just some simple remaster. I think what gets me the most excited for this potential remaster is the visuals. Especially for a Nintendo kid like me, it was one of the most impressive parts of the game back when it was originally released, and I imagine it would be a big focus for the definitive edition as well. X is the perfect game to test out the Switch 2's new hardware, so obviously the remaster would get some graphical overhauls. The fancy new console graphics would probably be the game's biggest wow factor, but it wouldn't surprise me if on top of some performance upgrades like better resolution and frame rate, there is also a big change in art style, similar to Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition. As of right now, X is probably the closest Nintendo has ever gotten to trying realism, which is why it can look a little awkward when the characters also have those big ol' anime eyes. I think trying to focus the art style a little bit makes a lot of sense, and although some people might not like it, I assume Monolith would veer towards the anime style rather than the realistic style, just to keep it somewhat consistent with the older games. We've already gotten a small taste of this with Elma in Xenoblade 2, and I think it works super well. I picture it getting something similar to Tales of Arise. Its painting like anime art style is beautiful, and it feels like a pretty natural evolution of what modern Xenoblade looks like now. It would make the world and characters look so much more colorful and vibrant than they already are, and seeing as the world is one of X's main appeals, it would be great to see it pop. All that being said, I'm really not too worried about the visuals. Monolith Soft consistently makes their games look as good as possible, so I'm really just excited to see what they can do with even better hardware. All I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up looking closer to this rather than something like this, but either way I'm sure it'll look amazing. Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition didn't change a lot with its core mechanics, which I think is fine for a game that is slightly more story-based. Xenoblade X, however, has much more of a focus on gameplay, and I think putting in the effort to make it feel as smooth as possible would do a lot for the game. I assume they would keep what changes they already made in Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition, like the Quest Navigator and the little art icon bonus effect thingy, but there's still a ton of other quality of life changes I could see them making to improve the game as well, like letting players change the time of day in the menu instead of having to go to the clock things, or give the player some way to reallocate their class experience and battle points so that it's a bit easier to switch between classes. Maybe get rid of some of the prerequisites for continuing the story, such as needing to explore a certain amount of one area. I get that exploration is a huge part of the game, but if someone wants to just run through the story first, they should at least be able to do that. I would love it if the Intel tab of your menu worked similar to the affinity goals in Future Redeemed. It doesn't have to be as crazy as Future Redeemed, but having a collectopedia system for items as well as enemies and areas would work perfectly for Xenoblade X. I might be asking for a lot here, but they should add full online multiplayer as well, and not like how it worked on the Wii U. Let me actually run around the map and fight monsters with friends. That would be awesome. Maybe they could even add some new weapons, classes, or arts to the game just for some bonus content. I'm not sure if this is just me, but I remember the scale combat being a little slow. It might be because of the long cooldowns or the number of arts you can have equipped at once, but maybe they could speed it up somehow? That might completely break the game, but for me, fighting on the ground was a lot more fun, and because of this, I never really used the scales when it came to combat. That and my copy of X is super scratched, so every time I try to get a skill. Another thing I would absolutely love to see is the ability to switch between party members in the middle of a fight. I couldn't believe how much it added to Xenoblade 3's combat, and I'm kind of hoping it becomes a new series mainstay. Especially in X, I think it would be a really fresh addition, as most people tend to only play as the super overpowered avatar character. If you could easily swap between everyone, then I feel like players would be way more incentivized to try out the other party members, even if they're a bit weaker than your avatar. You just have so much more of an impact on the fight when you can control all your party members, and I feel like it should be a relatively easy thing to implement, although admittedly I have no idea. These are all just random spitball ideas that I think would be really cool. I'm sure the development team has a much better idea of what they can add with the time and budget they have. But even if they can't add too much, all the little things add up, and it hopefully helps in making Mira just that much more enjoyable to explore. I think it's fair to say better graphics and gameplay would definitely be a part of the remaster, which would be amazing for a game that's already as ambitious as Xenoblade X. Where I think this remaster can get really crazy though is with the story changes. At this point, it's pretty common knowledge that X's story isn't as complete as the 3 mainline games, but that's actually mostly due to the fact that a lot of the original story didn't make it into the final game. From what I understand, Tetsuya Takahashi wrote more for Xenoblade X than he did any of his other projects, and due to various limitations, not all of it could be fully added to the game during development. There were plans for another city, new story scenarios, and even an actual protagonist that isn't just the Avatar character or Elma. If you're interested in the details, you should check out these 2 videos by JBspherefreak and SparksOpus, where they talk about the development of X and all the things that didn't make the cut. It's a really interesting watch. Anyways, to make a super long story short, they clearly had a ton of ideas that weren't fully used in the final game, which probably contributes a lot to the poor narrative. Now, while I think it's unrealistic to ask for a complete story rework, I would love to see a bit more of Takahashi's original vision in any way possible. The best way I could see them doing this is, of course, with a new side story. It's kind of become a shoo-in for the newer Xenoblade games, and honestly, X could use more than just one. I won't spoil anything, but the ending is extremely cryptic and confusing, without any real answers.
You're not making any sense, mate.
It's obvious when you beat the game that the story isn't complete yet, and myself and many other fans have been dying to know what was supposed to come next, and I think a side story would be a great way to follow up on this. I would also love a prequel story that covers the events of the alien attack on Earth. Maybe it could shed more light on Lau's family, how Elma ended up on the White Whale, who the lone hero was, and even what Earth looked like before the attack. Earth being taken over and destroyed is the most important plot point in the entire game, and although it happens right at the beginning, we really don't know a lot about the details. And I think more context would be amazing, not only for Xenoblade X, but potentially also for the whole series. Oh, and quick spoiler warning for Future Redeemed, in case you haven't played it yet. As you probably know, Future Redeemed ended with a look at planet Earth, and with it came subtle confirmation that Xenogears, Xenosaga, and Xenoblade X were canon in the mainline Xenoblade series. It seems like Klaus's world is the thing that's connecting it all, and if his Earth is the same as X's Earth, then the story kind of writes itself. We know from Xenoblade 2 that there was some major war happening in space when Klaus blew up the world, and we know from the radio in Future Redeemed that on Klaus's Earth there is a project that involves sending humans to live in space called Project Exodus. It lines up almost perfectly with Xenoblade X, and in a prequel story they could really tighten up the connections if they want to. Which brings up another quick point that I want to mention. There are some inconsistencies between Xenoblade X and what we learned in Future Redeemed. A new side story could clear some of it up, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw some retcons in the main story, assuming it would fit the narrative better. Something like Alvis's necklace in Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition was a really small change, but it ended up being insanely important later in the series, and I don't think anyone was upset by the change, even though it wasn't in the original. It's tough to say what the Xenoblade X equivalent would be without knowing the full unused story, but I'm sure they'll change what they need to in order to drop some lore here and there. Takahashi is clearly always thinking 5 games ahead, so there's gotta be something there, right? Anyways, I think X's ending is in much more need of a follow-up, but if they wanted to connect X to the other games, then I think a prequel is the better way to go. Although, I don't really know if that's entirely needed after Future Redeemed. Let me know what you think. If we're super lucky, maybe we can get multiple side stories, but that's probably a lot to ask. Like I said at the beginning, we really don't know what direction the series is going in. But I think remastering Xenoblade X would be such a great way to keep fans happy while waiting for the next mainline project. The game's 10-year anniversary is coming up, so maybe that's the perfect time to do it. It really is such an amazing game that I want more people to experience, and depending on how they change things and how they write the side story, it could also have insane implications for the future, potentially even leading into Xenosaga or Xenogun or whatever. It just seems like a win-win situation for everyone. I don't want to get mine or anyone else's hopes up, but I am optimistic and truly just excited for whatever comes next in the Xeno series. Go crazy, Monolith Soft. Anyways, that's pretty much all of my thoughts on the topic. Let me know what you would want in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, and what you expect next from Monolith Soft. I read every comment, and I love hearing what everyone has to say about these kinds of things, so yeah, let me know. Thanks so much for watching.